Welcome to the Decentralized Edge Podcast, where blockchain and Web3 stories take center stage. I'm your host, Sam Evans, and every episode I bring you candid conversations with the engineers, founders, visionaries, and investors shaping a decentralized future. Whether you're looking to break into Web3, scale a team, or stay ahead of industry trends, this is where you'll get the insights you won't find anywhere else. This podcast is brought to you by Blocktail, the leading specialist talent partner, connecting top blockchain and Web3 disruptors with the world's most innovative companies. Right, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Season 1, Episode 2 of the Decentralized Edge Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dan McCarthy, who is the Head of Talent for Paradigm. Dan, it's great to have you on the episode. If you're able to introduce yourself in a bit more detail, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. My background's a combination of engineering and exec recruiting. So I came up at Google, where I did like almost 7 years hiring infrastructure engineers across Mountain View and London, and then back in Mountain View. And then left Google, did the first recruiter to head of talent thing at a YC funded company called Clever. It's like a K through 12 ed tech platform. So joined them at 15 people, built out the Eng team, built out the recruiting function, left at 150-ish. And that was after 4+ years there. Followed a boss to Lime, where built out the first incarnation of the exec team.
Yeah.
This was 2018 to 20. And then since then been at Paradigm 4.5 years. And in that capacity, my role is both, running internal talent here at Paradigm, kind of growing the team, where we've gone from 10-ish to 65. And then probably more of the time spending with the portfolio, where we have 80 to 100 investments, working with founders, working with candidates, generally just trying to kind of control the flow of the best people in the industry.
Yeah. There's been, I was just looking into a bit more detail before speaking with you today and doing a bit of research before the episode. Some of the investment portfolio that Paradigm have. Obviously, Blocktail partner with Paradigm across quite a lot of them, but names like Coinbase, obviously, things like Privy, Phantom. There's just a ton there, and your background too is so unique from coming from a monster tech company like Google, and then going to super startup, YC funded super startup, scaling up that recruitment team. How have you found it going from Google to super startup to now a very unique role in the TA space of overseeing a massive portfolio of investments where you're not necessarily a part of those individual organizations, but you're very much heavily involved in knowing what's going on and who's trying to scale, who's trying to grow, who's trying to hire, who's trying to fire, things like that?
Yeah, very different roles. I think the most important thing that I learned at Google, and what most recruiters learn at places today, Stripe, Coinbase, is just what does excellent engineering talent look like? That's kind of the lifeblood of most early stage companies. The ability to differentiate between people at the 99th and 95th percentile of the talent spectrum there. That I think was kind of my foundation. And then coming into Clever, it was funny because you go into the interview process and obviously they're asking questions about how you build a recruiting machine, how you evaluate talent, how to structure the process. And then you get in the door and you realize they're looking to you for guidance. They're we don't know how to do anything, which is kind of an overstatement. I mean, the founders are fantastic, but you really do have to kind of invent things from scratch. So that's what we try to kind of put in place at a lot of seed stage portfolio companies, is just kind of taking the founder's urgency around hiring and putting that into a really well-structured machine, and then trying to give them an understanding of what excellent candidates look like, and ideally make some of those connections for them.
And I think of just from experience of working with you guys, and we myself personally have worked really closely with Privy and Phantom over the past few months, and just experiencing the level of support and obviously Calder, we spoke to Calder and stuff, and you keep close to Calder and things. So the level of support that you guys provide your companies is really helps them, I guess, in terms of knowing what to look for and how to attract that talent and be competitive with the big tech companies and the big banks or whatever it may be. but also just be really successful in their sort of growth journey as best as possible from a talent hiring perspective. Have you ever had like struggles where you've like really had to get deep in the weeds and sort of really educate? Because founders, a lot of the times founders are amazing at what they do, but when it comes to talent and hiring specifically, and this is why I thought this episode would be really intriguing, is you can be the best, most intelligent founder in the world, but doesn't mean you're an expert at hiring and attracting and like selling and things like that.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, we see founders at kind of different points on that spectrum where like some of the founders are, 24, incredible technical minds, like have built this really awesome product, but like have maybe never even been through a recruiting process themselves.
Yeah.
And then the other end, you have people like David Marcus who like built LV and DM at Facebook. So there's, kind of differing degrees of comfort with that process. I think a lot of it is taking the things that are universally scalable and putting them in place. Things like just kind of what the rough skeleton of a good interview process looks like, how you should think about evaluating candidates, and then being able to kind of allow founders to play to their strengths within that extremely broad framework. Because, some people have different roles that they want to play in the interview process. Others have like extremely strong opinions about some things and others don't. So a big piece is like helping founders understand, for lack of a better term, vibes. Obviously you want to be able to run a process that's like rigorous and quantitative where it's important. But at the end of the day, like a lot of these companies are like 6 or 7 people. And like when you're making a bet on somebody, it's about like qualitatively, who is this as a person? And like, are they going to be able to adapt through like 4 different roles over the course of 5 years with this company? So yeah, that's just like a personal thing. And ultimately a lot of it comes down to trust between, us and the founder and the candidate, the candidate and the company.
Yeah. And I think with founders, I think one of the things that they're best at, but can get in their way as well, is that nobody's more passionate about those organizations than the founders themselves and things. And like, I think they can get very, very, angsty and anxious to kind of get people through the door so they can just keep building and building and building. But people like you and I, obviously in the talent side of things, there needs to be that process. There needs to be the right sort of processes in place and stuff. But when it gets to that sort of selling point, like no one's better than that, like the founders and the people internally at the business, and getting candidates excited. It's like you say, you're trying to convince people to sort of take a bet on you as a founder and as a startup organization, and sort of why they should join you when there could be company B over here that's, maybe not as exciting, but far more stable and longevity and financially in a better place and things like that. So yeah, it's a massive, I would say, sort of thinking point for talent people, but it's really, really exciting as well to work with these founders, which you obviously do every single day, that are working on some of the most innovative products and have nothing but passion about what they're doing, which is, I bet, very rewarding from your perspective. And you've obviously come from a world of like Google and then the sort of the startup side as well. Is there a big difference, do you think, in terms of like traditional like technology hiring and attraction in just a typical tech world? So like Google's the big, like, the big tech companies versus organizations in your space where it's like blockchain, Web3, brand new technologies, and not that many people are either experienced in or know that much about from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, I think the kind of unstated headline there is that like things change really fast. I mean, when I was at Google, it was 2006 to 13, which is like radically different from what Google looks like now. And even within that like 7-year time frame, there were like substantial changes when it came to like what we had to do from like a talent strategy perspective to get the best people. I think like early on in that time frame, like Google kind of had this advantage because they were definitively the employer of choice for like a particular type of engineer, and that allowed us to like reach out to people and just like guarantee that people would be interested and kind of drop what they were doing to enter the process. Still, like it was very difficult to identify people who had the skills to be able to make that happen. And so as a sourcer, where you're in this like competitive environment with other people within Google, later within Facebook, Dropbox, competitor companies, like you have to be able to kind of develop alpha on like where that talent is. yeah, like one of the things I did early at Google was like I spent a lot of time working with open source developers who were working on Linux distributions that were based out of Europe.
Yeah.
And that was while we were spinning up like a site reliability office in Zurich, in London, some offices in Poland. And yeah, there were just like a lot of great engineers out there who maybe were not constantly being bombarded with interview requests yet, and was able to kind of convert those to some hires. But then obviously, that got more competitive over the course of a few years. And, now everybody knows the universities in Poland as like a source of great infrastructure engineering talent. It's kind of the same now in crypto where like, you're always trying to find like sources of great people who have been like overlooked by the market. And certainly like as the specific technical niche that you're looking in gets narrower, it becomes harder to do that. But yeah, I mean, being on Twitter, being on GitHub, like being fluent with what people are actually working on beyond just looking at LinkedIn profiles, like that's kind of what makes the difference.
Yeah, it's a unique industry in where you just sort of touching on at the end as well, like the networking side of things. Like there's no industry like it, I don't think, where you can get on Twitter and find everyone. Where it's like everybody that's like interested in this space and has a passionate about it, like they're so active on such specific platforms and things, and like GitHub and Twitter are two really really good starting points as well for that. And we find a lot of people ourselves through even just like looking on like YouTube and see who's doing like talks at conferences and things. It might be like they work at a certain organization that's nothing to do with the industry, but they're getting out there to the conferences that are within, blockchain, crypto, Web3 and things. And nobody's more sort of vocal about their interests than sort of this industry. And I think that helps obviously us as recruiters a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still very difficult to find like the right people because there's a really high bar of entry from a technical standpoint and stuff. But yeah, it does definitely help there too. How are you competing with like a lot of the people you're trying to attract? So obviously like big tech companies and stuff, but also like big like banks with deep pockets, like big hedge funds and stuff. Because I think a big misconception, I talked about this on the last episode, is that that people think that because we recruit in this sort of blockchain space, that you're looking for like blockchain engineer and like Solana engineer, like just like generic terms like that. But in reality, a lot of it for me certainly is like you're looking for just top engineers that have a really big passion and an understanding of just the blockchain and the Web3 sort of space in general, not necessarily like someone who's got 20 years of blockchain engineering experience because it just doesn't exist. How are you? Yeah, what's the sort of any tricks of the trades there? Where it's like, how are you competing with those like big banks, big tech companies with really deep pockets when you're a portfolio covering startup people who are trying to look at every dollar that's out the door?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in a given crypto company, part of the challenge is that like if you're hiring a 20-person engineering team, probably only 4 or 5 of those people are actually going to be doing like crypto specific engineering, as opposed to like traditional front end work, like traditional like cloud infrastructure or performance engineering. And so those talent sets are like just much more fungible across like Web 2 and big finance than if you're like a Solana, like a Rust specific Solana engineer. So yeah, like I think part of the challenge is identifying people who like do have those other options outside of crypto, but like are still excited about your thing. In practice, that means there are kind of 2 skill sets that you can draw from, or 2 talent pools. One is like people who are already within crypto, who are kind of working in parallel roles in similar companies, who like have an interest in the space.
Yeah.
But at the same time are like legible to every other crypto company and are constantly being bombarded with email.
Yeah.
And then the other pool is just like the broader universe. It's people who are at Google, Stripe, Databricks, places where they have like solid engineering resumes, but you have no idea whether they're interested in crypto. And I think you kind of got to go with like both of those strategies simultaneously. Part of it is also like using other tools like Twitter to identify people who are going to be interested in the thing that you're building. I think also just like using Twitter as a tool to make yourself more discoverable to those people who like don't have obvious signals of being interested in the space, but are lurking while they're doing their day job at like Square or whatever. So yeah, like you really just got to kind of press every button simultaneously. And then from there, it comes down to like the ability to make a compelling case to the candidate that like this project is going to win and you're going to have a good time here doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I guess it touches back on like when they're interested, they're really interested in this sort of space and stuff. So if you can just play the numbers game, an educated numbers guessing game in terms of who you think would be the right sort of candidates to come on board, but also interested to come on board, it kind of it becomes quite prominent quite quickly once you get them on the call and stuff. But sometimes you obviously are speaking to people and they've already got an offer in hand from Hudson River Trading or someone like that with a big giant deep pocket. So it's really cool to kind of hear, especially you, from seeing how all of these different startups are kind of going about it, probably in their own way with your guidance and stuff. But like I said at the start, like the guidance that you provide, I think really does set them up for success. And a lot of the companies that we support within your portfolio, are an absolute dream to work with. They get it from a sales perspective. They get it from a candidate experience perspective. They get it from timeline perspective and stuff. So yeah, it really does make it easier in a very, very sort of difficult space to attract the right talent and stuff. How about, because obviously Paradigm's very, very, heavily investing VC firm within the sort of blockchain crypto space. How about the founder side of things? I don't know how much you can speak to this, so feel free to swerve it in any way you can. But yeah, what would you look for in founders that sort of says, yeah, we should write a check to these people or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fortunate in that like a lot of the founders who we backed have been kind of on our radar in some form or another for a long time. And a lot of that is downstream of the research work that we've done. So Burgos, our CTO, our engineering team, like they just spend a lot of time writing white papers and publishing open source work. And so when somebody kind of starts spinning up a new project that's backable, like 9 times out of 10, we've been, that person has attended one of our like hackathons. So we kind of know who they are, and that's like certainly an advantage.
Yeah.
Which leans into kind of the first thing is like, does this person have like a deep technical understanding of the product space that they're operating in?
Yeah.
That's kind of always been like our signature, is the ability to like go a little deeper on the technical level than like some of our competitor investors. And because of that, like that is something that we really look for.
Yeah.
Even, maybe when it means finding people who are from like a more heterodox background than maybe like a super traditional founder.
Yeah.
So that's certainly one piece of it. Another piece is basically just like great adaptability, stuff that like you look for in every founder, somebody who like is going to face unforeseen challenges and overcome them. Yeah.
So the last episode was with Grant, who's the CEO and founder of Kinetic, and he's talked to that as well. We talked a lot about the challenges that startups face, and he's just like 9 out of 10 of the challenges that you face as a startup founder and things is you would never have ever guessed that you were going to face that challenge.
Yeah, what's the Mike Tyson quote? It's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
founder every single day.
But like I think it shows, that you guys obviously looking for that technical understanding, because obviously that's super important. Because when you're a startup founder, you're going to be wearing multiple hats and having to get mucked in and technically going after it as well. But also that resilience to overcome all of those problems that you face, and then the adaptability for. I think a lot of the times, like the idea that they might have for their startup idea, it might actually 2 years down the road not even look like the same business or the same business plan, because the market dictated one thing, but they might have failed on their primary plan, but this side part of the business sort of took off and customers started getting involved from that perspective. So yeah, it's cool to see that. But what I thought was more sort of cool to hear from you is that it sounds like a lot of the founders that you do back are ones that you kind of meet and build a relationship beforehand from like your hackathons and things like that. It's not necessarily they just come out of nowhere, knock on your door and ask for a check.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these are people who myself or Chris on our talent team like have spoken to before, and like when we're sitting down with them to talk through hiring strategy for their seed stage project, like maybe this is the third time we've talked to them in a couple of years, because the first time we reached out to them, it was about an infrastructure engineering role at another like more mature startup.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a lot of these people are known quantities, and it's not an enormous universe. That's also kind of an advantage we have as an investor, where like the talent market in crypto is still so small. Like if a company comes to us and says they're going to hire a GC, like we can say with high confidence, like you're going to want one of these like 200 people.
Yeah.
So we can stay on top of that group in a way that's much harder for like a big generalist investor.
And with that, so touching on that as well, like how do you support your portfolio from that perspective? Like from, because I know a lot of your portfolio they'll usually have their own sort of dedicated TA person. You know, sometimes you'll play us in to kind of help where there's not that dedicated TA person. How about you guys from a talent perspective? Do you get involved in like the actual like seeking candidates from time to time, or do you just sort of help make sure that things are flowing in the individual talent teams?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of our job, is like staying connected to people who are kind of the top like 1% of the ecosystem in any given role that our portfolio companies are likely to hire, and like funneling those people to the companies where it's appropriate. So yeah, like in practice, a big part of it is like working with founders to put the engine in place, helping a head of talent get off the ground, and then also just kind of staying abreast of specific roles that they have that are high leverage, and then like trying to introduce people who we think are really great. So yeah, obviously, you know, it's hard for us to kind of own like an entire pipeline, soup to nuts, across 80-ish portfolio companies, but like, you know, we're going to make introductions to like very high quality people, and hopefully, you know, from time to time we can short circuit a search by plugging somebody great into a portfolio company.
Yeah, nice, awesome. And one thing that we've sort of touched on before and talked about previously, kind of, but I would love to bring it up here, is the sort of advancement in tools being used for recruitment. AI is obviously the top trending word probably of the past 2 to 3 years now. But I mean, it's just absolutely taken off, and I think there's a massive showing of it in the recruitment space and recruitment tools and stuff. Like, how are you guys leveraging that, and sort of where do you foresee that going within your strategies and your advice to your portfolio companies and as they start to grow?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, internally, like we have a tool set that we use to kind of deal with the like operating system that we use, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of played around with a bunch of like sourcing specific AI tools that have hit the market over the course of the last few months. To be honest, like nothing has jumped out as like totally game breaking. I think like they're good, but they're also like incremental and important steps forward in like saving people time.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I think that like there's kind of this big repository of public information about people on the web across LinkedIn, GitHub, Twitter. And it's going to be a lot easier in the near term to like consolidate and synthesize that and like make judgment calls about who you should be reaching out to as a sourcer.
Yeah.
So I think like the cost of running that process in terms of time and money is like dramatically dropping. At the same time, like the elements of recruiting that are just totally not scalable are like not going anywhere. I've like the best interview question is just like, tell me your life story. And I think like that gives you a really strong signal about somebody's like domain agnostic competence and ability to like stick through things and like who they are as a person and their values. And like, those are conversations that like frequently have to take place in person, not only because of like what you're getting into, but also just because like the trust thing, like candidates want to know not just that they're like working with a company that can use bots effectively. They want to know that they're working with a company that is full of people who are like high agency and trustworthy and like high integrity. So yeah, I think that piece is still going to be there for a while. And even if you look at like the companies that are building these tools like OpenAI, like they're still hiring a ton of recruiters. So that's always going to be a core part of the process.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things. I've thought about this obviously for a while. I'm in this space, and you start to think like, could a AI algorithm kind of do this? But I don't think the answer is yes. I think there's always going to need to be a human element to it, because a lot of it is like what you said, like coming down to like trust and like having those deep conversations from person to person. And I just don't know if AI could. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm naive, but I just don't think it could ever get to that point where it's like really, it's not just vetting this person technically, but are they a good culture fit? Does their background match exactly what the hiring managers, what they've pictured in their mind as the perfect candidate? And, if it gets to a world where kind of already exists now, where you get like recommended applicants on like LinkedIn and stuff, I personally have never ever like looked at that and then gone and sort of placed a candidate from that suggestion list, because all they're doing is just totally keyword matching, and it's like just doesn't even come close 99% of the time and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see. 5 to 10 years is a very, very long time, and kind of I mean, it's an absolute generation in this in the development of technology in this space. But for me, I think there's always going to be that human element, and it's just going to be these AI tools that we talk about that are just going to help us get more efficient as recruiters, than anything. Not even necessarily more accurate, but just I think efficiency is going to be the thing that improves the most throughout the world, especially as a recruiter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. I think as with most domains, like it's just going to make it easier to perform as somebody who's like high on the agency spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because when we work with early stage companies, like obviously if you're a 5-person team, like how to evaluate somebody for their technical skills. You can ask for a coding sample, you can sit down with them and work through something, and you can capture all the information you want out of their GitHub or their public presence.
Yeah.
And that's stuff that like will become more easy over time. But at the same time, when one of those companies hires somebody and that hire fails, like honestly, most of the time it's not necessarily because they can't code. It's because they can't deliver that code on time in a reliable way, or like they can't communicate with the rest of the team in a way that's functional, or like just people don't like working with them.
Yeah.
It tends to be the things that are harder to capture.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And well, one question actually for you as a man that's been recruiting in the tech space for a while, like companies like, well, just any tech company in general, but like certainly companies like Google and Meta, where pretty much every engineer in the world probably applied to one of their roles at some point in their career. Like when coding assessment's a big part of every engineer's interview process. No matter how tenured or recommended you come, there's always going to be that coding assessment. I've never really understood why they don't just have, like, when you click to apply to the role for an engineering role, why doesn't it just take you to a sort of coding assessment there and then? And if you fail it, your application doesn't go in front of the hiring manager or TA team. Or if you pass it, then the TA team and the hiring manager have got a very tailored list of applicants versus 1,000.
Sure. I think it's a combination of one, signaling, in the sense that like I think while that process would capture a lot of signal from the candidate end, it also signals to candidates like, jump into this machine and we'll decide whether we want to talk to you. And I think like whether they can pull that off is basically downstream of what the external market dynamics are, and like kind of where the power is at any given moment between like the supply and demand side for labor. There are companies now that I think are moving more toward introducing like automatic evaluation at different stages of the process. I know Coinbase is doing stuff in that zone.
Yeah.
So I think like we will see more bits and pieces of that. But at the same time, like I also think that the more AI is introduced into different parts of the process, if it goes over a particular line, like candidates will perceive it as a pretty strong negative.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, candidate experience is obviously something that we always advise as well. And like whenever clients are like, send us a resume, and if we like the candidate's resume, we'll send them a take-home case study straight away. And we're always like, please don't do that, because again, we talked about it earlier, you need to get these people bought into you above other companies. And it's like if they're speaking to them like humans and getting them bought in and excited about the company, and your strategy is to just throw a test in their face, it's a pretty bad signal and a pretty bad candidate experience from the first step.
Yeah, I mean, time and attention is capital, and you're kind of exchanging that between the company and the candidate. And obviously, if you're in an incredibly powerful position as an employer and everybody wants to work for you, sure, you can demand the moon. But in most cases, like you have to invest time and the team's attention in a candidate to get them to be willing to sink a bunch of time into developing signal for you.
Yeah. No, I agree. I asked that question, and then when you started talking, I was like, yeah, it's pretty obvious why. What about the sort of marketplace, the demand? Like, what are you seeing the most progression in? What are you seeing the most demand in from, not just from like a candidate skill set, but also just like from clients and companies in this space? Like, where do you see it sort of going?
Yeah, varies by role. Big needs now around like front end engineering, forward deployed engineering. Front end, I think, because a lot of the infrastructure projects that kind of went through the past like cycle have developed enough to the extent that like now more consumer-y or like user-facing elements are like the differentiating factors, especially with like some of the trading stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, front end is tough, and also because like those are just roles that are in high demand in Web 2 as well, and so like
Yeah.
you're competing against HRT for the same talent. So that's a big piece of it. And yeah, forward deployed, obviously like the ability to kind of have that technical underpinning and work with external clients is super important. General counsel, another one. I think obviously like the regulatory landscape is more favorable now than it has been in previous years. And so like a lot of companies are hitting the gas on development of various products that I think, they're looking for guidance in that respect.
Yeah.
And VP of engineering is another one. A lot of companies kind of rounding into the zone where they're hiring more aggressively, like getting to the point where they need more structure around an engineering team that's, maybe 30-ish people.
Yeah. I mean, we're supporting on like a handful of VP of engineering roles at the moment, and it's tough because A, you want the right person that's coming from the right background, but B, you want the right person that's interested and is going to treat this new sort of project like their whole world. And then like C, it's finding those people that do understand like what the slight differences are within the sort of blockchain and Web3, and more so understanding not from a technology perspective, but just from like a cultural perspective, like how difficult it's going to be to scale and hire at the same rate, to go through the same sort of challenges and nuances of the industry that it just generally faces and things. So that's a massive one. Front end one is what we're seeing as well. Like every client we speak to in this space is looking for like top front end engineers, and it's been like so tough to like find the right people because you are competing with them. It's also a bit more of a sort of subjective skill set because it's like portfolios and things involved. But I think the one thing that the blockchain and the Web3 sort of industry does really well is the sort of design side of things. Is like really, they really stand out, and like Phantom. I put a LinkedIn status a few months ago saying like Phantom's like team around their branding and everything like that is like absolutely incredible, and like the engineers obviously supporting behind that. General counsel is a massive one because it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. You can't find someone with general counsel experience in this industry that's got 20 years experience because it just doesn't exist. So it's like really transitioning them across and getting them to understand the sort of lay of the land in the industry as well. So yeah, that's a big one too. What about like, this is final question, but what about like the development of talent and hiring and things post, I guess, COVID, post sort of 22? Like, have you noticed a big change in that and kind of adapted to that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, huge arc since then. Obviously, the availability of like remote work tools has gone up dramatically. Crypto companies have also always just had decentralized workforces for various reasons. Like a lot of the people who were initially attracted to the space, it was because they live under, unstable financial situations, and like the value proposition is just much more apparent if you are not transacting in dollars every day.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big part of it, and continued for a couple of years. And certainly there are still big talent bases in Europe and Southeast Asia. At the same time, over the past like 2 or so years, like we've seen more of a consolidation of like founders trying to do the in-office thing in San Francisco, in New York. Even if they are like remote friendly, like there'll be kind of like an existing headquarters as opposed to just a completely decentralized team that gets together once every quarter. So yeah, like I think there's been some regression to kind of that norm. It's not as far as like we're going to be in the office 5 days a week every week. There are some companies that do that. I would say that's probably the exception.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of companies have distributed teams, but tend to have like the founders and a lot of the core engineering team in one of 3 or 4 core locations.
Yeah, I think that I've noticed dramatically, just as quick as everything kind of went remote, is like people are getting back to return to office policies and stuff. And like New York and San Francisco, I think are going to be the absolute hubs of the world, especially across crypto. You do have hotspots like, I mean, even like Dubai's got a massive like blockchain presence and stuff, but certainly like New York and San Francisco. And then there's still that remote hiring, and I think for the right candidate, but with a very heavy lean and preference for and it's not like being picky and just being like, you need to be in here. It's about building those cultures and building those office spaces out as well, because I think that's what got lost throughout COVID is like organizational culture. Some did it really well, but 9 out of 10 probably didn't keep the same culture that they wanted, or didn't build the culture that they intended. I'm happy to kind of see it. Despite being at home right now, I do prefer being in an office and things. And I think that as a startup, where we talk about the founders having all that passion that we talked about earlier, you want to be surrounded by people that share that passion. And you also want your passion to be contagious to the guy next to you, the gal next to you, to give the company the best chance at being successful.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are enormous advantages to working in person that are obvious, but at the same time, like you don't want to have to completely overlook somebody just because they live in rural Kentucky. I think the right companies are able to kind of walk that line. Privy being a pretty good example, where like obviously the core team is based in New York, but like they do have a couple of people who are outside the city. So it's really just about knowing when and how to make those exceptions while simultaneously getting the most out of like a robust in-office culture, as opposed to just here's a warehouse where a bunch of people are hot desking and now we have an in-office thing.
Yeah. I think Astor and Henry balance that line amazing at Privy. Is they definitely have that New York culture and that New York office space, which they built out amazingly. But I think that their ability to assess for the right candidate that could work from San Francisco and have the same impact as someone that sat in the desk next to them, I think they've nailed that, and that's been really awesome to work with them as well and kind of help them sort of scale their team out. But yeah, that's everything I had for you, Dan. I really do appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today and kind of help get this podcast flowing. But yeah, thank you again, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, man, anytime.
That's it for this episode of the Decentralized Edge Podcast. If you found it valuable, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Doing so really helps us to build an incredible guest list for future conversations. And remember, if you're looking for some top blockchain and Web3 talent to drive your business forward, visit blocktav.com to see how we can help. Or connect with me directly on LinkedIn or via email at sam@blocktav.com. If you've got a guest suggestion or a topic you'd love to hear more about, send that my way too. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.